Talk about NSA leaker Edward Snowden. So far, he has evaded extradition to the United States, both in Hong Kong and now in Russia. Snowden saying now that he took the job with contractor Booz Allen just to gain access to NSA secrets, and his plan all along was to tell the world about America's top secret surveillance program. Right now, he's holed up somewhere in a Moscow airport, hoping to find asylum. The Obama administration is calling Moscow to hand him over, but Russian President Putin says Snowden will not be extradited, and the foreign minister said he's not even under Russia's jurisdiction. Listen.
He did not cross the Russian border, and we consider absolutely unsupported and inadmissible the attempts which we see now, the attempts to accuse the Russian side of violating U.S. laws and almost accusing us of participating in a conspiracy. Accusations which are accompanied by fiction. There are no lawful grounds for American officials to act in this way.
Meantime, there's a response from Secretary of State John Kerry, this just coming in. He says that there is no extradition treaty with Russia, but there are standards of behavior between common nations, and he says Russia should not side with an international fugitive. Let's talk about it with Mike Baker, a former CIA covert operations officer, also president of Diligence, a global intelligence and security firm. So we seem to be at a standoff here right now, Mike. What leverage does the United States have, if any, with the Russians to try to get them to give up this guy?
Well, I think as viewers can see from the clips that you just played, we have no leverage. I mean, you couldn't make this up. We were feckless and meek and mild-mannered in trying to deal with the Chinese. I was amazed that we couldn't strong-arm or barter or negotiate with the Chinese. I was convinced we would, to get him handed over while he was sitting in Hong Kong, which, despite people's belief somehow that it's a separate entity, is a Chinese jurisdiction. Now with Russia, he's sitting in the transit area of Sheremetyevo Airport, and the Russians are having so much fun with this that, as you noted, the foreign minister, Lavrov, is saying, well, he hasn't crossed Russian border. He's sitting in the transit area of Moscow Airport, and they're parsing words because they're enjoying this so much. We have no leverage. This is a massively disappointing situation right now.
Well, let me read a statement from Vladimir Putin, this according to the Reuters news agency. Putin said, Snowden is still at Sheremetyevo Airport, as you mentioned. He says he is free to leave and should do so as soon as possible. Now, that seems to be kind of a mirror image of what the Chinese did. They let him sit there in Hong Kong for a while, kind of, twisted the knife against us for a while, and then said, okay, get out of here, get on your way.
No, you're absolutely right, John, and that's what they're doing. Both the Chinese and the Russians are getting as much enjoyment and PR out of this as possible, right up to the point where it could create an actual, from their perspective, international incident. And I think they're reading this actually correctly. Foreign leaders tend to be very adept at understanding the substance, the core of other foreign leaders. And I think they're looking at the current president here in the United States and thinking, okay, he's a great politician, but there's no principle. They've seen him back off of a variety of other statements. They've seen him shift, and we've had an inconsistent mixed message foreign policy for years now during the course of this administration. I think they're reading that absolutely correctly, and frankly, I think they're also understanding the internal politics of the White House better than a lot of people here in the U.S. I think they understand that the White House really doesn't have stomach to get Snowden back here and then go through the spectacle of a trial with Snowden, keeping this on the front pages as we move towards the midterm elections.
Apparently, Snowden has these 4 laptops worth of material that he has basically stolen out of NSA computers. Do we know that the Chinese and now the Russians haven't accessed all of that?
No, you raise a really important point here. Look, every U.S. company in the private sector that does business in China has an understanding that once they set up a corporate office there or a facility, that their intellectual property is going to be obtained by the Chinese authorities. That's what they've been doing for decades, and they're very adept at it. The idea that somehow Snowden, who is nobody's idea of a Jason Bourne, is traveling around with a great deal of classified information in Chinese territory and with the Russians has not somehow managed to lose that intelligence to these very capable intel services is laughable. And he was feeding information to the Chinese about our national security posture towards the Chinese, which all by itself is a life prison or a life sentence. I mean, imagine if you were a CIA officer, you walked in, took information out of a safe in the building about a Chinese operation that we were running against the Chinese, and walked that over to the Chinese embassy. You would be in prison then for the rest of your life. And that is what he essentially was doing while he sat in Hong Kong.
Wow. It's really an interesting situation, and we're going to continue to watch it. Apparently, Putin thinks Snowden ought to get out of Russia, but we'll see if they actually enforce that. Mike Baker, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, the president